The Ultimate Adventure continues, as read by the bathroom reader. I am covering for the Plurality Report, who is currently sulking in embarrassment because he called The Ultimate Adventure science fiction, when in fact it is a fantasy novelette. Chapter 2. Somehow managing to keep from eating chunks of plate or silverware, Stevie Jebson finished his repast in the beanery, almost oblivious of the tall, preoccupied fellow who sat calmly across the table from him. When the last choice stains of ham had been eradicated from the dish with a piece of bread, Stevie looked around for more food, found none, and then became suddenly aware of his stuffed fullness. He had to admit to himself that he could not have managed another bite had been carrying on with his momentum for some little distance past his capacity. Replete with great comfort, he leaned back in his chair and wiped at his mouth with a napkin. "Smoke?" said the tall man. "Oh, no," said Stevie in haste. "My aunt, I never use them, thank you." It grieved him not to be able to further please his benefactor, and he was acutely conscious of a great wish to help the man however he could. This feeling of extreme servility was new to Stevie, and was in fact mainly an aftermath of a succour always present for a brief moment. "Then," said the tall gentleman, "it is probably time for us to repair to my laboratory." "Yes, indeed," said Stevie, getting up and following. The tall gentleman paid the check and then marched down the avenue at such a speed that Stevie's short, frail legs were hard put to keep up with him. Nothing was said for blocks, mostly because Stevie had no breath with which to state even the great well-being which filled him. At last they came into a dingy neighborhood where the kids and garbage cans and clotheslines were drowned in the roar of trucks and gabble of gossiping women. It did not strike Stevie as particularly odd that this might be their destination, but the tall gentleman thought it might. "Isolation," said the tall gentleman. "Buried from prying eyes, you know." Stevie looked at all the people and wondered about it slightly. They had stopped for a moment at the foot of a tall flight of drab steps, and the people who sat upon them were suddenly silent as they stared at the tall gentleman. They knew him, that was plain, but they had no desire whatsoever to say anything to him. The tall man did not even notice, but threaded his way up the flight and into the cabbage-essenced hallway. He led the toiling Stevie up 7 tedious flights, each one marked by his own peculiar odor of stale cooking, until one could almost tell the nationalities on each floor. At last, under the grayness of a dirty skylight, they came to another stop, and the tall gentleman put a big key in a bigger lock and opened what might better have served for the main gates of a fortress. He carefully shut and locked the door behind him. The change was almost a shock. Here everything was shining metal and glass and silence. Not a sound leaked in from the streets below, nor a speck of dust. The glittering interior struck Stevie as a unit, and then, gradually, he pried the various objects apart and knew no more than he had in the first place. Great retorts coiled their glass snakes around the benches. Chromium trays were spread with brightly cruel instruments. Glass cabinets bulged with strange-looking pliers and knives. An operating table spread its white stillness under the unlighted domes of massive metal lights. Against the wall of the room beyond could be seen a panel superimposed on what looked like a great coil of copper wire. Above, 2 electrodes stood silent guard over the gleaming faces of instruments and meters. Stevie advanced with cautious awe. In the far room he caught sight of a chair and stopped. It was very big, with straight back and wide arms. It was upholstered all in black with straps across each arm. Its middle and its legs, shiny copper fittings, brilliantly polished, studded the thing. Stevie had been all kindness and light up to that instant, but once he had seen a picture of an electric chair, and this object was its exact duplicate. He whirled to the door and bumped into a man he had not seen before. Arms gripped him and pushed him gently to the center of the room and down into a chromium armchair which somehow was under a beam of light. Stevie stared at the second stranger. The fellow was dressed in an intern's apron, but one didn't notice it at first, sensing rather the great bulge of muscle in each arm and the thick hair which must be matted upon the massive chest. The man's head came up to a point, and of his brow there was none, hairline jamming down and serving as eyebrows. The face was ghoulishly without expression, and the ease with which he had been forced back made Stevie suddenly afraid. The tall gentleman was slowly changing his street coat for a white apron. Stevie abruptly realized that the fellow hadn't smiled actually at any time, that his regard for Stevie might well have been paralleled by that for a broom or mop. The light hurt Stevie's eyes. "Please be calm," said the tall gentleman. "It is highly unlikely that you will be seriously hurt." "Highly?" Gulped Stevie. "Seriously hurt?" "I could not run the risk of being overheard in either park or restaurant, and so I could explain very little to you. You look like a very intelligent fellow. You are probably a scholar fallen upon evil times. If so, perhaps this will have a great interest for you. My name is Thomas Bolton, and I have been in the past a research scientist of some small note, though I am no longer connected with any institution, having come into my own money and for other reasons." Stevie looked fixedly at the lean face and, for an instant, thought it most cadaverous. Anxiously he wondered if he couldn't think up a valid excuse to get out of this place. But he was not good at lying. His aunt... "My investigations," continued Dr. Bolton, "are somewhat irregular and are of a secret nature. When one leaves the track of recognized science and goes pioneering into the realms of philosophy, there are certain people who do not concur with the practice. You will, of course, reveal nothing of what you learn here. Before I have had to do with dolts, but I chose you because you appeared to be above the average intelligence. That is good for my purposes, unless one has a quick mind upon which to work. He finds it difficult to get accurate reports of travels." "Travels?" said Stevie. "Yes, that is, so to speak. Yes, one might say travels, if you follow me. We are attempting interplane coexistence, that is to say, transit between degrees of existence. I," he stated with dignity, "am seeking to bridge the gap between our plane of existence and any one of the countless others which coexist with us, perhaps static, but more likely similar to our own. That there are such planes, there can be no doubt." I don't understand," said Stevie, trying to keep his eyes in their sockets. How can a person go where there isn't anything?" The doctor had been aloof, but now he gave the impression of a cavalryman who cracks quirt, jabs, spurs, and, to the blare of "charge," snatches saber from scabbard and streaks to the attack. "Oh, you don't," he snapped. Where there isn't anything, he snarled. See here, young man, he grated. I didn't ask you to come here and criticize what all evidence indicates, and what far greater minds than your own have already conceived. Have you ever heard of the Veda? No, said Stevie, cowed. I thought not. You have never heard of the Veda. You have never heard of the great Hindu cult of Yogiism, of the source of all Western faiths, Christianity, Mohammedanism, Mithraism. Pah! Do you know your own name? I don't know, stammered Stevie, and indeed he wasn't sure. With haughty, onerous patience, the doctor explained. God is all is God, and God is an idea. Schopenhauer, Kant, Spinoza, they all learned on the Veda for their assumptions, and added to them sufficient substance to bring the greatest adventure of all within my grasp. Have you read The World as Will and Idea? He challenged. No, said Stevie. I started it, but... You started it, roared the doctor. And what did he say in his first line? I forget. You forgot the most important line of his whole book? Yelled Bolton. Well, he added, bringing his voice down to a pitch where he could handle it. He said, the world is my idea. That's what Schopenhauer said. And how many know what he really meant? The world is my idea. And it is, I tell you, it is. Modern psychologists, with their transference of self into another self. Bah! The self never transfers itself into anything. The self is a sponge. Do you see that pile of knives over there? Stevie did, and winced. There! Cried Bolton. You have proved it. For an instant you were enclosing knives. Think of a garbage can. Stevie made a slight face. There! Cried Bolton. For an instant you were a garbage can. Stevie made a worse face. Oh, you don't like it, said Bolton. But it's so. Why do you give alms to the beggar? Because you, for an instant, have taken that beggar into yourself, and you, for an instant, until you orient yourself, are a beggar. Do you understand? In the presence of a powerful friend, you are that friend. In the presence of a doctor, you are that doctor. If he is a friend, you are soothed. And in your turn, you become a part of all the others who see or hear you. The world is in your mind. Your mind is made up of as much of the world as you have seen, heard, smelled, tasted, or touched. You are aware of objects in space and time, and consequently, you think that objects really exist in space and time. Kant said that, brightened Stevie. Ah, then you have read something. You know I am right. We can never know the thing as it is, but only as we sense it. Yes, that's what Kant said. Without our senses, we would be without this world. But, he cried suddenly, how do you account for crystal gazing? Stevie blinked. How do you account for men in a hypnotic state, seeing scenes they have never seen before? How do you account for dreaming of places you have never been, or people you have never met or read about? Well, now we're getting someplace. A man in a hypnotic state is only possessed of a small amount of his senses. He is unable to orient himself completely. Suppose, and his eyes glowed, suppose a man were to lose his senses completely. What would happen then? He'd be sick afterward, said Stevie. Bah! Snapped Bolton. Have you no wits? As long as the inner self is alive, as long as the brain contains life, as long as the central brain is wholly uninjured and untouched, man is not unconscious. But suppose he would be fully alive within himself, but still without the use of any of his senses. Suppose all sense messages from the nerves of touch, smell, taste, sight, and hearing were stopped before they reached the center of consciousness in the brain. Then, he said in triumph, the man would be unable to tell where he was. For him, this world would not exist. It would be uncomfortable, said Stevie. How do you know how it would be? No man in the history of the world has been relieved of all his senses for so much of a second. The world is an idea. It is your idea. Have you never asked yourself, who am I? Why am I here on this earth?
Sure, said Stevie.
Very well, said Bolton. Who are you?
Stephen Jebson.
Mocked the doctor. Stephen Jebson, Stephen Jebson, Stephen Jebson, Stephen Jebson.
Please stop, wailed Stevie.
Good. Who are you? There. You know now that a name is only a collection of sounds and has absolutely no meaning other than identification. You have no knowledge of who you are, why you are here, from whence you came, or where you are going. And are we to suspect that you are merely of this world when you weren't in it a century ago? All I have to do is repeat my own name, and I know that I am conscious of not belonging, that I am detached from this existence, that I come from another place.
Stevie, robbed of his identity, of his sureness of being, felt miserable.
We come now, said Bolton, to the crux of the experiment. We are going to deprive you of all your senses, and, I have no doubt, you will come back to us with a strange tale to tell.
Me? Said Stevie faintly.
You, said Bolton. The others I have had here served only to give me practice in disconnecting messages from the brain. They were too stupid to be more than badly shaken by the experience.
Shaken? Gulped Stevie.
Only one was actually ill, and even he recovered after 2 months. Come with me.
Bolton led off toward the other room. Stevie got one glimpse of the electric chair and grabbed the arms of his own, staying put. Bolton suspected it. Without turning, he said,
Boris?
Boris had stood with vacant eyes all this time, but now he swooped massively down upon Stevie and snatched him out of the chair like one picks up an old newspaper. Stevie saw the chair again. He clawed and yelled, No, no, I won't. You're mad. Boris dropped him into the chair and slapped the straps across his chest. Please, said Stevie, please, I don't want to go any place. I just want to stay here.
Quiet,
said Bolton, inspecting a tray of instruments and finally picking up a hypodermic needle.
This is Eucaine, isn't it, Boris?
Boris grunted. Please, said Stevie, I don't want to.
Quiet,
said Boris, tightening the straps.
Stevie subsided. I have been careful to use no drugs or otherwise which might induce hallucinations, said Bolton. I want my data to be uninfluenced in any way. Hand me that alcohol for the needle, Boris. And I am trusting your memory to give me the accurate facts.
Oh, moaned Stevie as the needle neared.
The central nerve system of touch must be blocked, said Bolton firmly.
Stevie winced as the needle bit. Bolton pushed down on the plunger and then went back to his tray. He picked up a piece of material which had a ropey look and pushed it under Stevie's nose.
Chiliu, he said informatively.
Stevie's nose smarted for an instant, and then he discovered that he could no longer smell the iodoform in the room. He couldn't smell anything. A dark terror began to seep into him. A moment later, when he felt as though he floated in midair, he cried, Let me go! Let me go! But Bolton smiled in satisfaction to see the nerve block take effect. Stevie could no longer feel anything, not even the seat. He was a human free balloon. I won't really leave here, he begged anxiously. Bolton was affixing the copper cap. Well, what is that? Cried Stevie.
Perhaps the heart of the whole thing, said Bolton with a tinge of pride. All is energy, and energy is merely force. With this machine it is possible to translate cellular energy into fluid force so that it becomes companion to Bergson's élan vital, the very essence of life. Without sense messages to orient itself, body follows brain blindly, and all cellular subdivisions unify and are for the first time totally controlled by the brain. That copper cap might be likened
onto a vacuum cleaner to give you the idea. The brain must obey bodily sense messages until there are no such messages. Then, to exist, the body must wholly obey the brain. Small animals have vanished under this, and I trust it will work equally well with men. You mean I'll vanish? But I don't want to vanish. The earplugs, Boris, said Bolton, and all sound went out like a broken bowl. Stevie strained his eyes on the objects around him as though they were mud hooks slipping through a sandbank. Bolton removed one stopper. You feel no drowsiness? No, said Stevie with a whimper. Good. You will not lose consciousness. We have made a perfect nerve block without affecting the brain. Do not forget to remember all things you may encounter. I must have this report. You understand that? Without it, how can I be sure of my own voyagings when I try? When you try? Gaped Stevie. Of course, cried Bolton. Do you think I want to stay in this accursed world, disgraced and dishonored, my name dragged in the muck at every turn because my brain is too great for them? Why do you think I want to perfect this? But why don't you experiment on yourself? I run no such chances, said Bolton. Mine is the brain. I am too valuable to risk my own destruction. Destruction? Wailed Stevie. Bolton put back the ear stopper. He and Boris withdrew across the soundproof room. Bolton's hand lingered on the rheostat for a moment and then, seeing Stevie was all right, started to pull down. The lights faded out. Stevie felt like a ship with its anchors dragging and the cliffs just behind. The room was black. He could hear nothing, see nothing, taste nothing, feel nothing, smell nothing. He was in a void. Other planes of existence, if they had existed, were... It happened! He had been conscious of a sensation akin to the tightening of a bowstring before the arrows lets fly. He felt as though he was being shattered against a concrete wall. Then all was madness. A dynamo thrown out of balance threatens to burst itself asunder. A roller coaster leaves the track as it starts down. The 9,000-volt shock of the electric chair is like a physical blow. A glass thrown against the floor shivers itself into 1,000 fragments. Star shells, bomb shells, skyrockets, grenades, lightning and artillery, comets, suns, and careening planets. With a high, thin wail, Stevie's hurtling self fell endlessly, turning over and over, dropping millions of miles in a minute, while the nausea of terror drew his stomach muscles taut as a drumhead. And all the while 10,000 projectors threw 10,000 different pictures upon the same screen. Past towers, seas, valleys, and snow-capped peaks. Past streaking meteors, blinding searchlights, exploding bombs. Whole galaxies burst before his very eyes. And he fell into a bottomless pit, which yawned like a well with 1,000,000,000,000 levels. He fell, and all the while, as the tide ebbs from the shore, consciousness was gradually slipping from him. He screamed against the churning din and felt his thin voice taper away into nothingness. As the man in agony sinks into the relief of velvet death, Stevie slipped prone to the black couch of oblivion with a shuddering, moaning sigh.